Yo, what up, what up, what up? It's your boy Reverend Stu and my homie, my big sister. Something of a co-host, but I don't like co-hosts. It's cool. It's cool though. It's cool. Reverend Boatwright, how you doing today?
Well, what's up with you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing good. In this present moment, I am well. This has been a really good week so far. I've been taking a break from like writing and things like that. And it's time to get back in the saddle in a little bit in a few days to kind of get back to it. But I've been good. I've been playing some video games and just really enjoying life. Like traveling. So I'm good. What about you? How you?
I'm well.
Good.
I'm still fasting.
Oh, yeah.
40 days.
Lord's still working on it.
The Lord's still working. So cool though.
See, y'all, she trying to tell me I don't love the Lord because I ain't on no 40-day fast.
I didn't say that.
You don't love the Lord. I'm on my 40-day fast. Lord, I'm
just
running,
seeking something a
trying
little
to make
different. I can't.
199 and a half. Lord, I'm running.
I'm sure you saw God in that video game, right?
Oh yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I saw God in the video. It's kind of gory. The show is actually on HBO right now, which is actually very good. It's entitled The Last of Us. It is a story of when a zombie kind of pandemic, post-apocalypse world, it kind of went out, and it's the story, well, at least on the video game, it's an adaptation from a video game. It's the story, really, of the protection of this one child, which in some sense becomes a kind of narrative of love between father and daughter, or at least metaphorically speaking, since I don't want to give it away, but yeah, it's real good. It's real good though. It's a very like it pulls on your heartstrings, your human strings. It kind of challenges our ideas of like what it means to be together and like how we can be depend on one another. And, in some sense, I was reading about horror, right? And this actually leans very well into this conversation that we're having. I was listening to Tanana Reed Dew, who's a scholar out in Cali, who is a scholar of black film, particularly black horror. And she was talking about Jordan Peele's work, Nope. I think this was actually a conversation on Get Out, and during when that was coming out and things like that. And she talked about horror, and she says that horror, the end goal, of horror is empathy. That by the time you get to a horror film or horror thing, you should have developed an empathy and believe that somebody whom you started with now in the end is worth saving. And so I guess that leans well into, the horrors of this conversation, church hurt.
Ooh. Church hurt.
Yeah, we're going to talk about church hurt.
Wow. Interesting topic.
It is. It is. I think, but I think as a way of introing, I don't know where people are at when they watch this or when they listen to this, but I do know, in my experience and in the many experience of other people, that whatever we name church hurt, or call church hurt, it doesn't really matter in some sense, as much as like there are so many people who have been hurt in the context of church.
And I like how you say that.
Yeah,
right.
We've been hurt in the context of church, and I've learned over the years as I've gotten older that people don't often leave the church because Jesus failed them, or they failed themselves. But oftentimes people leave the church because people have failed to look like Jesus, and so have consistently failed those who we call our neighbors.
Okay, I like that.
I'm trying to work with it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna add to the reason why.
Yeah, go ahead.
Expectations, right? When we think about it, right? So as we talk about, for some that are going to call it church hurt, being hurt in the church or being hurt by church people or someone in the church, right? I agree, however you want to phrase it, because we don't want to negate what people...
Right. Yeah, their real
right,
experience.
we don't want to negate that, so that's not what we want to do. But I think when we think about this hurt in the church, people, I think it's all about expectations, right? Because no matter where we are in this life, we are going to experience hurt.
Oh, 100%.
Let's be honest. And I think because of the expectations that we as human beings have of the church or people in the church or believers or Christians, we don't expect for them to hurt us. And when it happens, it almost seems as if it, and maybe I'm going too far with it, like breaks us in a sense, right? Because someone else at work backstab you, hurt you, or whatever, but we don't walk around saying work hurt. Even in relationships, we get hurt, but we forgive or stay around that individual because we're in some type of relationship with them. But when there is an offense that happens at church from somebody, we leave or we're upset, and instead of having a conversation with that individual, we go and have it with other people, and then the gossip begins, right? So, because I don't think that when we choose to become members of the body of Christ, sometimes we think it's going to be perfect because it's church.
Oh, yeah, without question.
Because we know that we're going to get a good sermon from the pastor. You got some good old believers in there that's going to love on you and possibly do life with you and surround you. But then something happens, right? And then we just, we look at it differently, or we leave the church or whatever. I don't know. I think that the expectations, when you come to church or you join a body of believers, sometimes I think we got to check our expectations. Let's be honest. That's my take on that.
I feel it. I feel it. I'm not even gonna lie. I feel it. I think, this is a really good quote from Gabriel Mate, who's a physician who wrote an incredible book entitled The Myth of Normal. And he says that we don't respond to what happens, or we don't always respond to what happens. We respond to our perception of what happens.
I like that.
Yeah, it's very, very brilliant quote. And it actually, when I read it, it kind of made me kind of assess some things in the past that did I actually respond to what someone else did, or my perception of what they did, or did they respond to me based on what I was or what I did or didn't do, or did they respond to me based on my perception of what I did or didn't do? And so I guess I'm wondering, like, how, I think it's a really good way to intro the conversation to kind of start thinking about is like how would you define, church hurt? For the person who may be trying to navigate it, or they have left, or, they're wondering if like what's up where I'm at right now.
So, what I kind of jotted down, because I had to kind of think about it too, I'm going to just say basically when an individual experiences like a form of emotional distress, by members of the church, it may be in response to some type of church policy, or maybe it's an overzealous member, that hurt someone, or maybe it can be, let's be honest, it can be done by people or persons who are passionate about defending the faith. Right? I mean, it could be sister so-and-so or deacon whatnot, right? And stickler for rules, right? Because, depending on your era of upbringing in the church, don't slap my hand, but, a lot of people were taught a lot of religion, and religion is based on rules. So now you have other people coming in, and they may not know, because we may be dealing with spiritual immaturity, right? Someone just being converted, don't know any better or whatever, or maybe they do, I don't know. But because many people were brought up on the rules, right, of religion, and I was just talking to somebody before this podcast, and they basically stated this particular church was about, if you do this, you're going straight to hell. I think defining that term for me is really about maybe someone experiencing some type of emotional distress, right, by somebody in the church.
No, I feel that. I get that, because even if I think about my experience, like, I would say that there have been times where I legitimately was hurt by people in the church, and I don't know. I also think that there is a part of that that can be actual institutional hurt.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't think that like
Oh yeah.
like pain inflicted on other people is just like based on like terrible individuals.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that like pain can be inflicted by being inside of an environment that those terrible individuals can hurt you and you're disempowered at the same time.
Oh, that's good, Sue.
And so that is when like institutional, like the hurt turns institutional, where that individual has hurt me and the institution protects them while it disempowers me. And so that's why I'm kind of careful to tell people that they actually didn't experience church hurt.
Oh, I agree.
And so like if I had to define it and try to think about my experience, it is like you shared, like any type of emotional distress or spiritual wound, emotional, psychological, physical, or spiritual wound that has been experienced on an individual or institutional level in the context of a religious community.
I very well put.
Yeah.
I agree. Right. Because I'm with you. I don't want to tell people, no, you didn't experience it. I don't want to excuse what happened. Number one, I wasn't there, or maybe
Fact.
I was there, you know.
Fact.
But we can never tell a person how a situation, a comment, a act, how it made them feel, right? When we really think about it too, Stu, let's kind of push it a little bit more. Like when we think about, you know, people in the church hurting people, a lot of times this hurt happens because broke people come in to the church, right?
Amen.
Or they come in contact with broken people.
That's real.
Right?
That's real.
And honestly, people in the body of Christ, right? We haven't learned how to master the act of acting or living like our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Right? So, and I don't want to just use this cliche, hurt people. I'm not saying it like that, but I am saying that we also have to remember that the same people that show up on Sunday mornings or show up on our small groups or whatever are the same people that show up on our jobs or the same people that we encounter in our neighborhoods or in the mall. And they are humans that are beings. They are human beings that are flawed people that will make mistakes, right? And I'm not excusing what has happened, but I do think oftentimes that, again, we come in with expectations of church. Because there's a higher standard for people inside of the church, for believers or the people that are confessing to be believers. There's this higher standard that that's upon us, right? And so people don't come inside of what we call the hospital expecting to leave unhealed, expecting to leave broken. They come in expecting for us to help nurse their wounds, right? To put not just a Band-Aid on a broken arm, but they want us to put it in a cast until it's healed, right? They don't come in expecting for us to hurt them. But when they come in with these expectations, and maybe somebody had a bad day.
And that should be okay.
But I'm saying
sometimes.
But maybe they had a bad day. Or maybe we had a bad day.
Yeah.
And we took what they said wrong.
Facts.
And for many people, because we don't talk about the hurt with that person that we deemed have hurt us, so we leave or we stay and we're still wounded, right? The wound is still there. It's never healed because you never had a conversation or maybe you didn't forgive. So now there's another encounter that happens. And that wound that never, ever really healed because maybe it wasn't nursed, right? Now the wound is reopened. And so now there's deeper hurt. And so now what, right? And so maybe this person leaves and they may go to another church. But the same way you left the church or the person in that, that church where you got hurt, you're going to go with that same hurt to another church. And the wound is still open, right?
That's real. No, I think that's actually very true, which I think is important for us, to wonder why do people in church like have such high expectations of one another? That's like that's immediately where my mind kind of goes. Like why do we have such high expectations of people whom we say are broken people in need of love? You know, I think we as human beings are very good, especially people of faith. You know, we're very good at like praising us when like we're great and preaching the gospel. So think about Paul and John Mark, right?
Oh, yes.
You know, Paul and John Mark, where it's just real.
It's real.
That sometimes you're going to be in a situation where both of you are gifted, both of you are amazing, both of you are creative, but sometimes you're just going to disagree. Now, the case can be made like that Paul was wrong in the way he related to John Mark.
Right.
Because he exercised a certain type of power where he could be that way.
Right.
And treat him that way and cut him off like that. Like, but and I think that we should be able to have that imagination.
I think what we see in that, because I had that down too. We see all of Paul's humanness. We already know who Paul was. He was Saul first, so we know that. We read about his struggles, but for me, this particular story really, because he was becoming a leader. Let's be like, can we imagine what Mark and Barnabas must have been feeling like? You're supposed. Listen to my key words. You're supposed to be a leader. And that's what people say when they have experienced this type of hurt. You're supposed to be a Christian. It doesn't change that I'm still saved.
Facts.
What we see in this experience with Paul and John Mark is we saw all of Paul's humanness right here.
Real.
And what he showed us was, listen, I was in my emotions. I was in my, you left me.
Facts.
So nah, I'm good, bro. You go your way, I'm going to go my way. So I see all of his flaws, all of his humanness. I see here he did not practice emotional intelligence, right?
Oh, facts. He did it.
Right.
That brother needed some work.
Come on.
That brother needed some work.
And this is the result that we get. So I think this is a great example of, if we want to talk about church hurt or people.
That is beautiful.
Like,
that's
when we
real.
think about it, we see him as a leader that still has flaws, right?
100%.
That still makes mistakes, that sometimes get in his emotions and say, listen, if you can't do it my way, guess what? I don't need you.
Facts.
But as we all know, the end of the story.
Yeah, that's real. They end up coming back together. I wanna stay there for a little bit just to talk about like John Mark and Paul in this narrative. Because in some sense, it's back to that quote. You know, we don't respond to what happened, but we respond to our perception of what happened. Now, how can we read that biblical text through that like quote? Well, is it possible that both Paul and John Mark had terrible perception of how one another related to one another?
Could have.
And that's the reason why they fell out, is because they acted without first like asking questions.
Having a conversation.
100%. So I feel like we fail one another in the context of church when we act without asking questions.
I agree.
Like, okay, that person did this or that person did that, therefore I'm going like do whatever, and didn't even ask a question. And I think this should be true of leaders as well. You know, we are not immune.
We're not immune.
Like, we're not immune to like to that reality. We should be able to be mature enough and humble enough to say that even if someone is a parishioner, even if someone is just a member, even if somebody just coming, you know, of course we don't entertain everything, because that just, you know, not everybody that come through the church door actually wants to be church folk.
Right.
You know?
That's right.
You know, some people actually come to the church through the church door to destroy church folk.
Right.
Because maybe they were hurt in the context of church in the previous environment, and they want to project their pain on other people. So therefore, that person, you know, has a character flaw.
Yeah.
That is an issue that they need to deal with. That oftentimes leaders, if we're going to be honest, there are a lot of people that's like want to be proximate like John Mark, but will abandon you in a second. They want to be proximate, but they sure will abandon you whenever like you don't stand up to that like expectation of like, oh, this is how church people should be. And it's one thing my therapist say, that one of the cognitive distortions for human beings is using the word supposed to
Oh, yeah.
or should.
Listen, because, when you say you're supposed to be, and I am mature now in my faith, right? And I agree. What did it say? Paul said it. We should not still be on Similac, right? We should be eating meat. I'm mature enough now. When you say to me, you're supposed to be, no. I'm not supposed. I still am a Christian. I'm still a believer. I'm still a preacher. Don't get it twisted, right? Because I didn't do something you wanted me to do. I didn't say something you wanted me to say. I'm still a believer.
Indeed.
I'm not supposed to be anything. I am still a believer.
Facts.
I do believe expectations. And I believe we forget that people are human beings.
That's real. I was talking to PG about that yesterday. Me and him was talking about that and how, I think we project a lot on people who lead. And I think it's very unfair. I think it's very unfair that as much as we want our leaders to care for us, we fail to care for our leaders. Like, I was actually we was actually talking about in the context of like relationships and leadership and things like that. And one of the things I brought up, and what we were talking about was like, in a relationship with your partner, or your spouse or whoever, you can't just ask them to adapt to you. Like, you also have to be willing to adapt to them. Like I can't like say, okay, hey, have grace with me and love me at every version of me. But then when it comes to every version of you, I reject them, shame them, and blame them for what I feel like I'm not receiving. And I think a lot of times in church, if I'm going to keep it a buck with you, for those who are emotionally immature, who perceive that someone else's humanness in relation to their humanness is actually hurtful in ways that it might not have been hurtful. Like, we got to do a better job of like not projecting and like having grace with people who just occupy a status, but still like live a life.
Live a life. Right. Because that's good. We're still on the topic, y'all, but when we think about that, even though the Bible doesn't say that Jesus took a bath, he brushed his teeth,
Facts.
he went to the bathroom.
Facts.
He did it.
Yeah, 100.
Right. He was still human. But nobody talks about Jesus like that because he's Jesus, right? But he was still human. And I think I agree with you. They have to still give us that same type of grace that we are believers. We are leaders, right? We understand this pedestal or standard that you have us on. Please take us down. But we are still flawed people. We all are Romans 3:23. All of us have sinned and fallen, right? And I think that it's important for people to see us just like them, to be honest with you, right? We just, our call is just a little different than theirs for the most part, right?
Yeah, and I think that's for us as leaders, or if you're listening and you're a leader in any capacity, it's not always a fair burden, but it's a real one. That when we accept that we are leading in some sense, then we also must accept that, like, we got to be mature.
I agree.
And sometimes, that's going to mean not always getting my way to save somebody else's heart from being broken.
Say that again.
Sometimes a leader, to be mature, it means that sometimes we're going to have to not get our way so that somebody else's heart may not be broken. I'll tell you a story. It was a few years ago, one of my friends, Rich Velotis, who's a pastor out in New York, he was telling me how this dude, his church is a non-denominational church, but Rich has a very Pentecostal orientation, right? So this brother came to him You know, it was like, yo, Rich, Pastor Rich, you know, why don't we be speaking in tongues and things like that? You know, why don't we be doing this? Why don't we be doing that? Complaining, right? You know, because that's what his experience. He wanted to be Pentecostal. He wanted to be in church and speaking in tongues. And so Rich was talking to him and things like that. And one of the things Rich told him was like, he had two choices in that moment. He said, you know, I could have responded and just shut him down and risk losing someone or breaking their heart. Or I tell him, let's think about something small and save somebody's life.
Yeah.
Because I believe that in the church, in the context of church, salvation ain't just in the future. You know, we're able to save the part of somebody's life that somebody else rejected.
Yeah.
And maybe as
That's
leaders, okay, my way is like, hey, bruh, we ain't gonna be doing that Pentecostal stuff in the church. You know, that just ain't it. That just ain't how it's gonna go down. But to be able to be mature and not break somebody's heart, maybe it's like, okay, maybe not yet. And I, as a human being, as a person, as somebody who's under the leadership of people, I have to say, okay, so let's get a little bit more realer. I want to preach. I want to lead groups. I want to do this. I feel like I have a call on my life. In such and such a church I came from, or such and such an environment I came from, they affirmed this in me. And it feels like there's no room for me here. Right? We, as those who are under the leadership of people, have to be okay with no, not yet. And not think of it as a rejection either of our humanity or our gift. That's maturity.
That's maturity.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think too often, and we know people are listening to us, so we hope that you're hearing our hearts. And as we're having this conversation, I think too often we have too many spiritually immature believers, right, in the body of Christ, right? We have too many people that are still drinking milk. And they come week in and week out. And as a result of that, a lot of things happen, right? So maturity. I would just leave it at that because I want to say some other things, but I agree. Maturity is where we need to help people get. But then also there's an accountability on your own that you need to get there too, right? I think even as we talk about people being hurt in the church, going back to that quote, perception.
Facts.
Let's think about it. Perception.
Facts.
Because maybe a person didn't really mean it that way, what they said. Or maybe you just took it wrong. And again, the mature person needs to just go and have a conversation. The Bible tells us if you have an ought with somebody else, you know, what you go to them. And I think what happens is we don't go to that person.
Facts.
We go to everybody else, and we never go to and the person that is supposedly have had hurt you, and I'm not saying they didn't, don't even know that they did it.
Exactly. And that's unfair.
That's unfair.
That's unfair.
They don't know they did it.
Yeah, because what's going to happen is that noun is going to turn into ammunition in the hands of a broken heart. And there is no worse thing in the church than ammunition in the hands of a broken heart and an immature spirit. Wow. There's no worse thing.
Wow.
In the church or in any space where people are together than ammunition in the hands of a broken heart and an immature spirit. So I'm wondering, Reverend, as we conclude this beautiful episode on Church Hurt, honest, vulnerable episode on Church Hurt, I really want to help people who legitimately feel hurt and rejected by church. Or in the context of church, I really want to speak to those people. Because I think too often those people are made to feel like they're crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not fair to them. It's not fair that leaders have things projected on them, but it's also equally not fair that people who are trying to navigate and process things that happen to them. I'm not even going to call it, mind the language that I'm using.
I agree.
We're trying to process things that have happened to them that they're not able to say, I feel rejected. I feel hurt. I feel pain. I feel this. So let's talk to those people who say, I feel blank. What can we share to them?
Whoa.
I ain't mean to throw no curveball at you. Did I throw a curveball?
You threw a curveball.
Oh, I threw a curveball at you. Come on now. Not at the conclusion of the episode. Come on. The conclusion. I threw a curveball at the conclusion in the ninth. You like baseball?
Yeah, I hear you.
This is the ninth inning. God, Lord, I threw a curveball in the ninth inning.
Oh. I feel, Stu. I think number one, they have to be honest with themselves on what they're feeling, right? Saying it out loud helps. Writing on paper helps, right? Dude. To be honest. And I do think at some point, what we don't do enough in the church is have crucial conversations.
Yes, indeed. Right? Facts.
And I'm not going to say muster up the nerve, but I will say, like, voice what you're feeling. That's the most important thing. Because if you hold it in, right, ammunition, you're holding it, and then something happens and right.
100%.
I think you got to voice it in the very beginning, and to yourself, paper or whatever, and then at the appropriate time. But I wouldn't tarry too long. I wouldn't wait too long.
Facts.
To have a conversation about it.
Facts.
But I will say this: don't leave the church. I think in those instances we have to have that Hebrews 12 endurance, right? Because think about Barnabas and John Mark. They went their own way and kept doing ministry.
That's good. That's real. That's real. That's facts.
Because what would have happened if this disagreement and they didn't? They kept doing ministry. Because one thing that we have, and I know we're going to get ready to go, one thing we have to remember is our gifts are not for us. And if we leave the church because someone in the church hurt us and we never dealt with it right, we're sitting on the gift that God has given to us to share with his people. And if we're home or we're doing whatever else, not partaking of the fellowship with others and utilizing our gifts and sharing our gifts, somebody misses out from you something that they need. Be okay with saying how you feel about the hurt, but don't tarry too long without having a conversation about it as well. And don't stay away. You threw a little loop at me.
That's good. That's actually really good. You did great. You knocked that one at least out of the park. You knocked it to the edge of the back. You knocked it over there. You did great. Thinking of my own situation, times where I have been in church and have felt like I'm crazy. Like, I first want to tell that person, you are not crazy.
You're not crazy.
You have a right to feel what you feel. You do. Like, you have a right to deal with what you feel. But you also must be honest about what you feel. Like, times in the past, there are times where people have legitimately, maliciously hurt me, have legitimately acted against me, and have partnered and conspired together to destroy whatever they could, my name, whatever, like, and that hurts tremendously. That's beyond hurt. That's betrayal.
Right.
Because you've given money, you've given time, you've given resources, you've given energy, you've entrusted a group of people with your life.
Right.
And you deserve to say, you hurt me. And I don't like what you did to me. Whether you agree with it or not, you should actually listen to me. So I'll first tell that person, those people, that you're not crazy. But then secondly, I would tell that person, like, you got to have a group of people who can help you see things you may not see in yourself and in others.
Those blind spots.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when you traumatized and you're emotional and you're wounded, it's very hard to be kind to yourself and other people.
Absolutely.
And I mean the type of kindness that reads what's actually happening in the most helpful way possible. So you gotta have people that help you out. But also, like, I feel like you also gotta be okay with parting ways.
Oh yeah.
Like, you gotta be okay with leaving.
And you can be cordial with people.
Oh, 100%. They may not be cordial with you because
okay.
a lot of the people that I left, of the church I left, they treat me as if I'm not even like a thing or a person or whoever. You know, that's okay. I see many of them all the time. You know, but like my healed self in the present is way more stronger, way more powerful, way more loving, way more mature than that hurt version of me in the past that's still lingering on to.
Right.
And so you gotta be okay with leaving sometimes.
Forgiveness too.
100.
And it's not for them. Forgiveness for you, right?
Particularly forgiving yourself for the ways you've blamed yourself for putting you in vulnerable situations.
Right.
And so that's what I would say.
Yeah.
I hope people found that episode helpful.
I hope so too.
It might be heavy, but it's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's helpful.
I think it's helpful too.
You know, I think, you know, it's a good segue into what we can discuss in our next, you know,
indeed.
podcast, because we definitely know those individuals that have experienced hurt in the church or from a person in the church.
Yeah.
One good thing I heard you just stated, to find people, right, that'll help you out. And what better way to do that than someone to disciple you?
Oh,
right?
100. Yeah.
And we've experienced here at Tab where a couple of our new members came in and they had experienced being hurt by people in the church. And she's no longer with us. Kayla Johnson and her young adult small group discipled them up. And they are the better for it, right? She allowed them to talk about it, asked them to identify what the hurt was, right? And then how is it making you feel, but then do life with them. And so I think that if we have experienced this type of hurt in the church from people, all the things that we've named, but another good way to help you to heal from this. We know God has sufficient grace, but then also God has also assigned people on this earth to disciple people and to walk with them and do life with them. So
that's real. Well, we hope y'all enjoyed that episode of Let's Talk Fam with Reverend Stu and Reverend Boatwright. And we hope you found something helpful that you can share with people. Thank you for showing up on YouTube. I've checked out your comments, and I will make sure I pop in and respond to your comments between our social medias. Yeah. People been showing us love. So we did. I'm the type of person that'd be like, yo, let's get a little bit better. So we did 200 something views last time, you know.
Oh.
But I'm shooting for 500 to 800 views, and then we can move to 1,000, you know. But that doesn't happen without you sharing what we put out, and just you know, getting these conversations to the people who you think need it. Maybe you're the person. I know I'm the person that need these conversations week in and week out and things like that. So. All right. We love y'all. We hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful, incredible, amazing, happy, and healthy week. And, you know, we'll be back.
Till the next time.
We out. Go, Jesus.